Hey, Puke. Took you so long.
It's Andy. What the fuck is Karen Bowman's ex doing here? And follow-up question, what do we do with her now? Her real name was Andra Clark, but most of us on the job just called her Andy. We'll get into her background a bit more later, but suffice to say she's one of the smartest people I'd ever met. Fluent in every language I'd ever heard, and stuffed to the brim with world-class skills in tradecraft, marksmanship, and counterintelligence operations. Everything you'd expect from somebody with a PSYOPs background.
Hey Andy.
Salut, chien chaud.
She'd always playfully called him hot dog in Quebecois French, which rubbed some Parisians the wrong way. Hotmail always bristled a little bit in response, jokingly I think. Andy propped herself up off the floor to stand, then moved over to the cell wall towards me. The place smelled like a pile of rotten dicks soaked in blood from a GI bleed. I initially wrote it off as festering corpses in a few of the other cells, but she definitely carried some of it over with her. As I was standing there looking at her, I was just amazed that we'd all thought that she was a guy. I was certain, at least from a distance, they'd loaded a dude into that armored truck. Maybe even BLT. I mean, that's why we were here. But to see her standing there right in front of me now, but she's like 5'6" and 140. BLT is 6 feet and a solid 220. We didn't have time to catch up. I needed to figure out what was going to happen next. I'm never sure what you're up to, Andy. Does breaking you out of here help or hinder you?
Yeah, I already wrote a strongly worded email to my travel agent. Thanks, though.
Time to go. There were no special reinforced locks or alarms of any kind that I could see in use on the cell door. This was clearly a temporary holding facility, and by the looks of some of the corpses rotting in nearby cells was more geared towards torture and intimidation than confinement. I saw a basic lock cylinder a toddler could learn to pick in 5 minutes of watching the lock-picking lawyer. Most of us maintained reasonable lock-picking skills, but Hotmail was unusually good at it, which was a little ironic given his law enforcement background.
It's an atom lock cylinder. Very common. Easy money.
He stuck a large Z-bar in the keyway to put pressure on the barrel, then stuck a wave rake in, and after a couple of zips, the lock popped open. Andy, we saw the fallout on the highway. There was a lot of damage there. I'm assuming it was a pretty big deal. Why did they just dump you down here and practically walk away?
They still just think I'm an accomplice. The local guys wanted to have some fun with me for a few days before the real work began at HQ. They had some big plans for me.
When the first guy came in at her, she farted a couple times trying to gross him out, but he was ready to eat those, so not seeing any other options, she shit herself.
Been pretty quiet down here since.
Whoa, putain de merde.
I wondered briefly if I'd have thought of doing that or if I'd have just done it out of unbridled fear. Chicken a la king coming right up.
So, can we get out of here? My ass is getting itchy.
Guys, I've got a patrol. 2 up, 50 meters, heading your way.
This told us that we had 2 armed guys coming towards us in a casual state of readiness along the path that we'd taken to get here. I'd seen several of these small patrol packages between 2 and 4 guys rummaging around during our earlier surveillance, so I had a pretty good idea what he was talking about. Usually it's the new guys pulling graveyards, so these dudes could be a little punchy, young, dumb pit bulls out to prove how tough they are. They're generally a little more vigilant than most, but had no idea what they were doing and overcompensated to hide it. They'd have weapons dangling off of them, knives sticking out everywhere, and bandoliers like fashion accessories draped all over them. The merc types with some experience and maybe even a spec ops background were often hired on as advisors and team leads, so they weren't going to be out howling at the moon with the nuggets. The high-speed guys would run a pretty tight ship during the day, but the uncooked meat liked to relax at night. It's what they'd always done, and it's what they'd default back to when the cats were away. I remember one of my first team leads used to say, "When the cats are away, the rats fuck you up the ass." I'd also been the rat in that scenario a few times and had the disciplinary letters on my file to prove it. I mean, I had some commendations too. It's all about balance.
30 meters. Same time. Same room.
Alright, we've still got to get out of here, and these two bozos are a problem. The option of going back the way we came was deteriorating rapidly, and this aggravated our situation significantly. We knew how to get back the way we came, but finding our way out a different way created a variety of problems, and not the least of which was not knowing if there was actually another practical way out.
10 meters. Same two. Damn, lost visual.
That's going to put them on our track in the cell block in the next 30 seconds. Andy slid into an open cell as quietly as she could. 2 other cells with corpses were left open, so Hotmail and I picked a couple and did our best to blend in. I could hear them now, talking back and forth in that coked-out Spanish, really fast and probably louder than they thought. My Spanish wasn't great, but I'd heard enough guys talking about snort and blow, fucking girls, and partying to know that it was in that context. The guys walked down the corridor towards us. They got past Hotmail's cell and suddenly turned towards mine. I was well concealed, but wouldn't stay hidden on a closer look. Fuck's sakes. If you're telling me these guys picked this moment to check the corpse for trinkets, I'll be fucked wholesale. Breathe. Breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, empty for 4. That's close enough. Hotmail let out a deep sigh as he got back up.
Putain, c'était moins une.
Andy grabbed a G3 from a dead guy, checked its status, and then joined us back in the hall. Hotmail and I talked about locking it back up to delay anyone who found it from figuring out what happened.
Won't matter. They're going to see it and won't care how or why. They'll just ring the bells. And if that happens, we want to be anywhere but here.
Maybe we should put some of our stuff on. Might give us a few seconds to get the upper hand if we run into anyone on the way out.
I wouldn't.
Andy was blunt, with no explanation. If she'd just been some rando, I'd have given her opinion 0 consideration. I'd already been sizing up the 2 dead guys to figure out whose clothes I was going to put on. But I'm okay admitting she's better at this stuff than we are, so time to go.
Did someone order technicals? I've got 3 inbound from the east along the train tracks. All with heavy guns, they're moving fast, roughly 1 click out.
Technicals from the east?
Probably my guys.
I looked over my shoulder at her. Something of an evil smirk spread across her badly chapped lips.
There are a few things I imagine Karen didn't tell you about me.
Clearly.
These guys are getting the high ground behind me. I can't track them from here. Gonna need to move south-southwest and high to stay relevant.
Do it. Just keep a lazy eye on them. Andy says they're good guys. I suspect it's a long story. We're on the move here back the way we came.
Yeah, roger that. Need a few minutes, sit tight. I'm back online.
Alright then, give me the good news.
Don't know what's going on yet, but I've got front row seats when the show starts.
Roger.
Base is quiet, nice and... Oh, hello. New friends. A few armored vehicles coming in from the north. Looks like a DIY armored loader and some heavier technicals bringing up the rear. That looks like the main body. Technicals
I don't know how he does it. That's about the time that shit got real.